I now have the pleasure of inviting upon the podium the esteemed panelist, first and foremost, Mr. Shekhar Golcha, the President, Federation of Nepali Chambers of Commerce and Industry, a renowned business personality, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Golcha is the Chairman and Managing Director of Golcha Group, one of the largest private sector organizations in Nepal, and holds a business administration degree from Webster University, the United Kingdom. Mr. Faris Haddad Zervas, ladies and gentlemen, Country Director at the World Bank. Prior to this, Mr. Zervas served as the World Bank Country Manager for Nepal, Country Manager for Malaysia, and the head of the Global Knowledge and Research Hub in Kuala Lumpur. He joined the World Bank in 1996 with the Private Sector Development Department and served in different capacity in Iraq, West Bank, and Gaza, as well as in Bolivia. Next, Mr. Arnold Koswa, Country Director, Asian Development Bank, who recently was appointed as a Country Director for Nepal. That's in July 2021. However, he has worked in Nepal from 2013 to 2019, where he had actively supported the government of Nepal with policy dialogue, project planning, processing, and administration in the water resource sector. Mr. Keshav Kumar Sharma, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Physical Infrastructure and Transport. Mr. Sharma has over 26 years of professional experience in construction management and has worked as a Director General of Department of Roads and in various departments and project offices as a chief. He holds a bachelor's degree in civil engineering and master's in construction management. Ladies and gentlemen, last but not the least, Mr. Radhesh Ponta, former CEO of Investment Board Nepal and Chairman and Senior Managing Partner, V-Rock & Company, a Nepal-based consulting and advisory firm. He is the first CEO of IBN and had served as the CEO of Bank of Kathmandu Limited, Kumari Bank Limited in Nepal. We are more than pleased to have our esteemed panelists on the stage for this panel. And with much pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming on stage the session moderator, Mr. Ramesh Adhikari, Under Secretary at the Office of the Investment Board, Nepal.
Good afternoon and namaste. On behalf of the Investment Board Nepal, I would like to extend our sincere gratitude to all of you for kindly accepting the invitation and being with us today. Respected Secretary for Finance and Chair of this session, and distinguished panelists who have been already introduced by the MC, and a warm welcome to you all. For the next 80 minutes, I'll be facilitating this session. I would like to go over today's session. The title of the session is Developing and Managing Nepal's Economic Development. And before I go further, I would request the chair for the initial remarks.
Thank you, Ramesh ji. The CEO of IBN and my fellow panelists, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to congratulate IBN for its 10th anniversary. I vividly remember the enthusiasm that we had when we established this institution. And I would also like to thank our development partners who have been instrumental to establish this institution and to help this institution grow in today's size and position. Really, that support was a very incredible support that we received from our development partners, so that this institution could come in today's position. And also, I'd like to thank IBN for giving me this opportunity to chair such a very important, critical, and also timely topics on PPP for infrastructure development, economic development, of Nepal. As we all know that resources are always scarce, and when it comes to the countries like Nepal, this is further acute. That means we have to leverage resources from different sources, and one of the sources, of course, is public-private partnership. That is what is accepted globally as well. And during this past 10 years, IBN has played instrumental role and has been able to bring foreign direct investment, the much needed foreign direct investment in Nepal, to build Nepal's critical infrastructure sector. And the success, one of the success story is Arun III, which is already in implementation, and I was so happy to hear from its representatives this morning that this project will be completed in advance, even before the targeted date, which is rare in Nepal. So I would like to thank all of you who have involved, to implementing this type of mega project. This will also set some example for us to invite other FDIs, because always the message that goes to the investment committee is that in Nepal maybe there is no good situation, blah, blah, blah. But that is wrong. If there is determination, there is commitment, then we can do it. And that is the example from Arun III and many other projects as well. Yes, of course, because of the COVID-19, now the FDI flow globally has gone down by 42%, as I was reading to UNCTAD report this morning. And the flow of FDI in Asian development countries is mixed. But I was surprised to see that actually in 2020, Nepal has received more rupees 1.94 billion more than in 2019. So I was a little bit surprised too. But we should not be generalizing this. We'll be definitely confronting the resource crunch, because the source is, there is a single source, right? So let's also be, careful about this. And also, I would like to just touch upon that when we talk about PPP, let's not always talk on the big projects. Let's also talk about agriculture and smaller projects as well. I have one success example to share here with you all. In Palpa district, Palpa Dhaka, that Dhaka topi and other clothes that we love to wear, the Dhaka industries were so sick. When I was in Butol, I went to visit the industries. They were so sick and they were almost closed. And all the Dhakas that one could buy in Palpa, they were imported either from Gorakhpur or from Lhasa. That was the situation. And then we did the assessment of the situation, and then we agreed that let's do a public-private partnership model. That was that province government will share some fund, the municipality will share some fund, and from the UK aid will have some fund, and the entrepreneurs themselves also will share. This morning I was talking to one of the contacts there. We had trained 250 women then. Out of 250, 235 have been employed by the same industries who were sick and almost closed now. And the 15 of them, they wanted to start their own Dhaka enterprise. And now the Dhaka industry has been connected with fair trade. So now they are targeting to export their production to the fashion market of New York and Paris. So there are certain stories, success stories that we can create, and we can also, bring that to the lower section of the society as well. So with these few notes, because we have such a rich panelists, we have mix of development partners, we have mix of public sector. Radeshji himself is a history of this institution, and he has worked tremendously. Right. And we have private sector, Shekhar Golsaji. So let's listen from our rich panelists. Once again, I would like to welcome you all in this very important session, and would request Rameshji to further you know, to move, to take this session ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. As we all know, the COVID pandemic has created unprecedented challenges across the world. FDI flows are challenging, as already mentioned by our respected chair. This session will discuss how best Nepal can mobilize public-private partnership investment to develop and build infrastructure projects in Nepal. PPP is emerging not only as a viable procurement strategy, but also a vehicle for developing infrastructure for the countries like Nepal. In this context, in this session, we will be focusing on some of the issues mentioned below. Mobilizing PPP investment in Nepal, that is one of the areas we will be discussing. And challenges and opportunities for PPP projects in Nepal. Another one is developing and procuring bankable and credible PPP projects to garner quality investment. And private sector roles and responsibilities in PPP. Last but not least is understanding the legal, policy, regulatory and institutional framework for PPP in Nepal. For the discussion, we have 5 eminent personalities, as already introduced by the MC, and all are with us at this moment. And now I would like to briefly share the overall session plan with you. In the beginning, each panelist, I request each panelist for the opening remarks, and that will be, each will be dedicating 3 minutes on that. Then I'll take them to the moderated questions and answers with them, and altogether I'll be presenting 2 questions to each of our panelists. And then we'll be, of course, now entertaining the questions from the floor, and 15 minutes is allocated for that. And the chair of the session will conclude the program at the end. Now I would request each panelist for their opening remarks. In the interest of time, I would like to request all the distinguished panelists to limit their opening statement to 3 minutes each. May I request Mr. Faris Hadar Jarvis, the country director of the World Bank, for the opening statement, and I would request him to speak on the challenges and opportunities of PPP in Nepal. And let me also inform you all, he has to leave right after the opening remarks due to some unavoidable circumstances. However, we have Mr. Peter Mosley, the lead specialist, finance, competitiveness and innovation from the World Bank, and he will join after the opening remarks. So may I request you, sir?
Thank you very much. I guess you can hear me. Yes, I can hear myself. Thank you very much. Thank you, colleagues. And allow me to start first by apologizing ahead of time for having to run an avoidable conflict of funds. This is one of the curses of having a blessing and a curse of managing a number of countries. But I'm very happy that my colleague Peter will be here. So allow me just to run through it very quickly and share some views, and we'll take it from there. First, I want to thank you and congratulate the organizers and my friend, CEO of IBN for this 10-year anniversary. Congratulations on the success you have achieved so far, and wishing you much more success in the future. Government of Nepal. I'm going to really focus, as our esteemed chair had said, or MC had said, that you want me to focus on, and I think this is good for the role of the bank to focus a little bit on what are the challenges and the opportunities moving forward when it comes to PPPs, which is very important. Let me preface it by saying that, I'm happy to say, I don't think at this point there is any doubt, I hope there's no doubt of the absolute loyalty and commitment of the World Bank towards the development of Nepal. We have been with you for 50 years, and we hope to not be with you for another 50 years because we hope you will not need the World Bank. But insofar as you will need us, you will find us. So it is in that spirit that I share my inputs and my views on this. We start from the premise that Nepal has made very big strides and steps, and congratulations. There have been, as my colleague Madhu Ji had said, Arun 3 and many others, which are examples of the potential that Nepal can achieve. And so let it be said that, of course, we think that there's huge potential and we support that. Having said that, my job here as the friend, there's an expression, a poem where I come from, and it said, God's best angels never tell him what he wants to hear, but what he needs to hear, or what she needs to hear, depending on your preference. So as a trusted partner of the World Bank, I will sort of try to relay out our views on what are the challenges that must be unlocked in Nepal in order to achieve its full potential, which we agree is very high. As the government is already doing, and I know Madhuji recently shared an excellent presentation on this, using this COVID disaster and turning it into opportunity by pivoting the government's vision and strategy towards also what the ambassador of the UK said today, towards this GRID agenda, which is the Green, Resilient and Inclusive Development Agenda, which is basically building back better and building back greener. So now is the opportunity for us to move forward on this. That we know. The second we know is we need tons of money to get things going and to really launch us on this GRID agenda. The third thing we know is that money doesn't exist in the public coffers. It simply doesn't exist. The needs are too great. So we need to leverage the private sector. So the question is how to do it. Now, the good news is we're around here, and we wouldn't be here had the government not recognized the importance of mobilizing private sector investment through PPPs, and IBN had not had a critical role to play in implementing this, which it has. So we're all here because we're in a good place, and this is something that we need to look forward to. And indeed, Nepal has had some success in attracting private sector investment and infrastructure. A few examples, of course, we talked about Arun 3, and of course, in the IFC space, the World Bank Group space, Upper Trishuli 1, which to us is a fantastic project. And these are really, really good examples. And there are other international, we did that with 8 international lenders, which tells you the extent of appetite there is for PPPs in Nepal. So when there's a will, there's a way, and if you build it, they will come. However, I think we would all agree these are few and far between. We want many more of these. The fact that we have 2 or 3 is great, it's necessary, but it's insufficient. And the idea is how to get to more of these, and particularly also outside the energy sector. Energy sector is very important. We ourselves are committed to this, and in the future, we hope to also commit even further towards hydropower development and the sector. But the question is, how and can we attract PPPs, including in transport, in water, in digital, in health, in education, in agriculture, tourism, etc. We need to diversify the PPP base, and this is where Madhuji also talked about his experience in one of these areas. So, it's good to take stock of the good stuff we've done, but we still have a long way to go, and we need to address it. To build a bankable pipeline of PPPs, we of course need an effective legal, regulatory, and institutionally framework to make it happen. The government has been moving in this direction, as evidenced by the recent PPPI Act, the PPPI regulation, and the PPP unit within IBN, and the most recent launch of the IBN strategic business plan. These are all excellent steps that need us to move forward. So what other areas and what is it that we need to continue to focus on in this area? And you've seen, we've had a lot of improvements, a lot of things, but if you look at some of the data, some of the indicators, particularly vis-a-vis regional and comparators, etc., we still have a lot to go, and we need to move forward with that. And as my colleague Wang in the morning, you all will recall, he said that infrastructure spending by sovereigns, utilities, and the private sector, just general infrastructure spending in 2020 took a very big hit globally. The data's there, we can't argue that. It is what it is. There will be infrastructure gaps. The South Asia region itself will have $1 billion a day infrastructure gap. So that is a gap that sovereigns and governments will by their very nature not be able to attend, so we need to do that. And moreover, your neighbors to the east, west, north, south, everywhere is also competing for private sector. So this is where it's an issue of not only running fast, but you have to run faster than your neighbor. And this is the nature of the challenge. 4 things very quickly, and then I'll stop, is some of the key constraints that we've identified. Again, a lot of excellent work has been done. If we want to move forward and we want to unlock, not only in energy, but beyond energy, start looking beyond that, looking at what we can do in digital, what we can do in transport, as you have massive needs in terms of provincial and rural and strategic roads. If we start looking at those, what are the things we need to do? 4 areas of interest is, let's screen better. PPP screening. Not all projects can be done as PPPs, and we have to acknowledge that. And as such, it's important that government continue to have a robust public investment management framework in place to identify and prioritize strategically important projects and then screen them. That way we can ensure that what we're pushing for and pulling for in terms of PPE has guaranteed success. So let's focus, triage, and then go deep. I think that's important. The other issue is this issue, which I'm sure my friend Madhuji will appreciate, this issue of fiscal commitment and contingent liabilities. And the contingent liability management. As you all know, PPPs, and I don't need to tell you, this is not free money. And many will have long-term direct and contingent liabilities associated with them. And if not managed properly, could have severe financial consequences to the government. So a strong fiscal risk management framework in place that is able to properly manage PPPs is very important. The third issue is capacity. PPPs are extremely complex and expensive to structure and procure. So the government, it's important that the government has the resources to properly identify, prioritize, structure, procure, and manage PPP projects, particularly large-scale ones. IBN is to be congratulated for surely, I would say, building up its capacity, but this will need to be strengthened moving forward. The ministries that will be in charge of or overseeing PPPs in their sectors will also need capacity. And last but not least are institutions and processes, or institutional processes. Projects typically take a long time to develop, not only in Nepal, but in the rest of the world. And as such, it's going to be supremely important to try and reduce this time by streamlining approval processes and by identifying institutional roles and responsibilities, and we need to clarify that. Those are some of the areas, but I know the government is aware of them, and use that to start the conversation. Look forward to working with you on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for highlighting and major constraints and the opportunities in Nepal in terms of developing PPP projects. And he also highlighted the fiscal commitment and the liabilities that the government should take care while developing the PPP projects. Thank you, sir, very much. Let me continue.
I'll leave it
until you have time. You can stay with us. So I would request Mr. Shekhar Golcha. He is the president of FNCCI, for his opening statement on the topic. Private sector roles and responsibilities in PPP. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Rameshji. Chair of the session, Mr. Madhu Kumar Marasani, Secretary of Ministry of Finance, distinguished co-panelists, distinguished participants of the session, friends from the media, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, it's an absolute honor for me to be part of this important session, which is developing and managing PPP for Nepal's economic development. So I really feel honored that I've been invited to speak on this. And also would like to thank for the generous introduction which I had earlier. So, and I will also like to take this opportunity to congratulate IBN for their 10th anniversary. And I think from a private sector perspective, IBN has gone from really moved very well. I feel that they have gone through the learning curve, and they have already started delivering substantial projects, which we can see. And in coming times, we feel IBN's role into nation building is going to be very, very significant. And so I wish you all the best. So because I've been given a topic, private sector's role in and responsibilities of the PPP. So today I would like to share the private sector's perspectives during the session, that what we feel and what will be the success quotients for this. Obviously, FDI and PPP is the two words we've been speaking in this session as well, and I think these are the key words which has been spoken for a long time. And so in FNCCI, which is the apex body of the private sector, we have a International Investment Promotion Committee, so which is taking care of both the FDI and PPP. And it is also well positioned to look after the PPP projects with special emphasis to the much needed infrastructure investment, and this is both for FDI and PPP. And I would also like to mention that the current drafting policy of PPP Investment Act formulations, and so FNCCI has been completely part of it, and so we really encourage this private public dialogues, and which we feel is very important in policy making of the country. Having said this, I must also mention FNCCI has taken a very larger perspective on the economy of Nepal. So what we call is the NET 2030. Basically what it means is we have taken 3 primary objectives which we want to achieve till 2030. The first is obviously we want to make our GDP to $100 billion. If we go organically, probably we will achieve maybe $70 billion. So we feel that if we are able to encourage investments from the private sector, including FDI and PPP, we should be able to reach 100 billion of GDP by 2030. And there is in our vision paper, we have mentioned almost all the initiatives which we need to take, which is almost 100 initiatives which we need to take to achieve this. Besides this, the other objective we have taken is to create 22 million additional jobs in the formal sector. It might sound too steep right now, but we do feel that if we are able to take care or the problems for the investments for the private sector, the irritants, what we like to call them, if we able to remove them, we will be able to create 22 million additional jobs by 2030. As we know that every year almost 500,000 people come in the job market, the youth come in the job market. Almost half of them today are going abroad for finding their jobs. Almost half have been absorbed here. So we feel that the formal sector need to absorb more, and we feel that by 2030 we should expect to create 22 million extra jobs. And we also expect that if we are able to achieve this, we'll be able to cut the deficit, the trade deficit, by half. So we have taken these main objectives for this. As I mentioned, there are 100 initiatives and 10 main focus areas which we need to concentrate on. I have to mention this, all this is theoretical. And theoretical in the sense that, even FDI, even though we make great laws or make great laws for PPP, investments are not going to come in. Private sector is going to be interested till the time there is actually profit in it. And if we are expecting FDI, till the time we can show them profit, they're not going to be investing into Nepal. And why? I mean, in the sense that we still feel that the cost of doing business in Nepal is extremely high. We can take various aspects of cost of doing business. I can mention 5 or 6. Of course, infrastructure is one, which we all speak about. Our infrastructure is extremely poor, and because of the poor infrastructure, the cost goes up, and that's what make our industries very uncompetitive. So this could be, this is one of the things. The second is obviously the finance cost. I mean, we are one country where finance cost from 6% to maybe 12% fluctuates within 6 months or 7 months time. So which makes the whole system look very vulnerable, and it does not attract FDIs. and private investments. So these are the problems which we need to solve. The other is obviously energy. Energy, if you see in our other countries, our neighboring countries, energy is subsidized for the industries, especially those industries which are creating a lot of jobs or creating a lot of value in the economy. But here we are talking about exporting of the energy. We strongly feel that industries should be given cheap energy first. That could be one of the competitive advantages for our country. Other things could be the labor cost, for example. We have figures which shows that the labor cost in Nepal, barring Pakistan, we are the most uncompetitive labor. We are the most unproductive labor, rather. And there's a lot more which can be done. The same Nepalese labor, which is very sought after globally, in Nepal, because of various reasons, the labor is not productive here. Obviously, we need to sort out the laws which is the reason they are not very productive here. And there are other reasons as well. So we need to sort this out, which is a part of our vision paper. And we feel that if we are able to sort these out, we can take the larger. We can take the larger objectives of our vision paper. So I feel that I will be talking about PPP more and the challenges we feel are there in the private sector. And so that's about it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for your.
Yeah.
Thank you. Apologies. Thank you. So I would request Peter Mosley to come in the dais. Please. Let me continue. Thank you, President FNCCI, for your valuable inputs. And interestingly, he has mentioned the private sector associations are also in line with the government policies and programs, and they have themselves initiated some of the visions, as he mentioned. Thank you for this. Now I'd like to request Mr. Arno Koswa, the country director of ADB, for his opening statement on developing and procuring bankable and credible PPP projects. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Sound? Yeah, hello? Check.
Yeah, we can
You
hear, I guess.
Thank you. So first of all, thank you very much. I would like to
No, I don't think others can hear.
thank the organizer for inviting me here. It's very important forum. And congratulations, of course, the IBN for their anniversary. 10 years anniversary. It seems long for an institution, but in view of the potential that we still have to reveal here in Nepal, I'm sure that the IBN still have a long life to go. And of course, ADB, as well as others, will be here to support the evolution of the IBN and the development of PPP in general in Nepal. Now, I've been asked here through this opening remark to talk about developing and procuring bankable PPP project. I wish to say that this is a generic kind of statement, and we'll maybe get deeper into Nepal after. As you know, ADB, as our colleague here from the World Bank, have been supporting our DMCs in leveraging private sector investment or competence through PPP all around Asia and the Pacific. And recently, the ADB launched an evaluation to try to reflect on our impact so far with this endeavor. And I'd like to share some points here. And one of the key recommendations of our ADB Internal Evaluation Department is that we should focus on strengthening the upstream PPP enabling environment. Now, so far ADB has been more transaction-oriented, with emphasis on delivering transaction advisory and project financing. But our multiple country experience suggests that upstream work is a critical preamble to competitive and sustainable PPP development. Upstream work entails having in place a workable PPP enabling environment. And this means having not only the acts, the regulation, the guidelines in place, but also ensuring that these are fully implemented and that they enable standard and uniform practice for executing PPP projects. While flexibility will be needed from time to time, interpreting standard provisions should be limited in general, we feel. Now, a good legal and regulatory environment is one where different acts and regulations are in harmony. National and sectoral laws should complement each other and not compete or contradict themselves. And ADB experience shows that the private sector is very quick in picking up, what is a good and a bad framework. And this signaling effect is very important. How can government send the message that it has the best framework in place? A short answer is that since PPP agreements are typically long-term in nature, a country needs to assure to the private investors and the commercial lenders that its PPP framework transcends the political cycle, the bureaucratic reshuffle, and has in place PPP institutions that are continuously working towards building capacity. The framework must also assure full clarity on the roles and responsibility of the nodal PPP agency and line agency. For example, a concession agreement developed and signed by the nodal PPP agency without engagement of the line agency, we have seen in certain countries, can face ownership issues in their management during implementation. All of this is aimed at harnessing standard and consistent PPP practice. Now, this brings me to the important aspect of the mainstream PPP work. ADB's engagement shows that generally a PPP agency could be different from government line agency, ensuring collaboration and coordination between the PPP and line agency for prioritization, selection, implementation, monitoring, and post-completion work is critical for the executing successful PPPs. In turn, this calls for building capacity of both the PPP and the line agencies. Preparing PPP project requires specific skills. ADB experience shows that often member countries lack capacity to match that of the private sector when it comes to ensuring value for money in PPP projects. For instance, an ex-ante PPP contract that has analyzed a revenue stream 20 years down the line is necessarily going to be affected by some unforeseen event. While anticipating such a scenario, how can value for money be ensured while not jeopardizing the accountability on part of contract signing officials? The short answer is to invest enough time and resource in conducting full due diligence of projects, analyzing the risk and allocating the risk to who is best placed to manage them. And there is no shortcut to this. The specific set of activities that require full due diligence of PPP project is supported by ADB under its transaction advisory work as part of its midstream PPP work. And ADB recommends that this advisory work is undertaken hand in hand between the PPP, and concerned line agencies so that knowledge transfer can take place. Specifically related to procurement, there are two key observations. First, on the unsolicited proposals. ADB recommends meeting two conditions to ensure value for money. Such proposals have to be part of a sectoral plan. And two, no financial support should be offered to such project. An alternative approach to considering unsolicited proposal would be to adapt the Swiss challenge approach, wherein counter proposals are sought for the project after a round of evaluation. The original unsolicited proposal will be benchmarked against the counter proposal as part of the evaluation and selection. The second point is management of the contingent liability, such as VGF. This is key aspect of PPP procurement, but experience shows that even countries with advanced PPP practice are revisiting implementation of the VGF. ADB recommends that VGF application is restricted to national priority projects, beyond first come, first serve approach for project meeting qualification criteria that are in the interest of the country. Now, to avoid setting a wrong precedent of a situation wherein many PPP projects will be signed, but only few are implemented successfully, ADB recommends full consideration of having a right enabling environment framework that signals well to the private sector and a mechanism in place to ensure value for money through full due diligence. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Arno. He emphasized on the enabling PPP environment is must, but that is not sufficient. The countries should ensure the PPP projects should be implemented, and he has spoken a lot, and that I'm pretty sure that will be helpful for the IBN as we are now developing this PPP project bank framework, and that might be very helpful for us as well. Thank you for this, sir. Moving on, I would like to request Mr. Keshav Kumar Sharma, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Physical Infrastructure and Transport, to deliver his opening statement on the topic, the need and the assessment of infrastructure projects in Nepal, and the role of PPP for sustainable infrastructure development. Over to you, sir.
Thank you. Is this sound okay? Hello?
Yes, sounds good.
Yeah. Thank you, Moderator Mr. Adhikari. Respected session chair, eminent panelists, all the dignitaries and experts attending here in this session, friends from media, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to congratulate IBN for its 10th anniversary with having this interaction session, and I am very happy to be a part of this session. I am thankful to IBN for this. My topic for opening statement is need and assessment of infrastructure projects in Nepal and role of PPP for sustainable infrastructure development. I think this, in my opinion, this statement is not to be further elaborated, that we all know the requirement or prerequisite of the infrastructures development for overall development of the country. This is the prerequisite and propeller of the growth of development everywhere. Basically, infrastructures can be divided into two categories. This is social and economic infrastructure. I think our discussion would be concentrated on economic infrastructures. In this regard, the importance of infrastructure investment on infrastructure can be well understood not by seeing the developed countries' performance, development history, but with the two neighboring countries of ours, India and China, as they achieving exemplary economic growth rate after increased investment in their infrastructure projects. We all know Nepal is underdeveloped country as of now and going to be graduated by developing country into developing country by 2022 and aiming to be middle income country by 2030 by achieving SDGs, which demands a tremendous increase in investment in the infrastructure with successful project completion. If we talk about the public sector's view on PPP, our sectoral plans, periodic plans, including 15th periodic plan, have assessed and explained the need of infrastructure project, necessary funding arrangement, fundings, probable funding modalities, and likely funding gaps clearly on top of the public or government funding, and envisaged for PPP tool as an alternative for bridging the funding gap. Similarly, the need assessment paper prepared by the NPC also estimated the financial resource required for implementing the SDGs in Nepal and has identified the potential areas for resources and expects more than 1/3 of investment from the private sector. Out of total requirement, 2025 billion rupees. 1/3 is envisaged from the private sector investment. Nepal's long-term national goal in infrastructure sector tells accessible modern infrastructures and intensive connectivity and long-term national strategy says that to develop internal and international interconnectivity and sustainable cities and settlements. So, I wish to make clear here that our public sector or the government sector, we have clearly realized the role of infrastructure, the modality for funding, and the total requirement of funding for the certain plan periods. And Government of Nepal has realized adequate realization in the role of infrastructure sector for achieving desired goals and development of the country since past days, and according priority in investing for infrastructure development projects, including PPP as an important alternative funding modality. It is realized from the government. To create enabling environment for PPP and private sector funding in infrastructure projects, we also have PPP Policy 2015, PPPI Act 2019, and PPIA regulation in place. Nevertheless, the attraction on PPP funding found not up to the mark in the major infrastructure projects except hydropower sector and some production industries like cement industries. Here, we have to think on how we can attract the private sector funding for the other infrastructure projects. So, the country has already recognized some infrastructure projects in which the private funding can be introduced. For example, expansion of basic road network, development of major highways, major commercial and important roads linking with north to south, development of major roads linking bilateral trade gateways, strengthening of roads in the Kathmandu Valley, and access road to the Kathmandu Valley, and tunnel construction for shortening the travel time as well as enhancing the road safety. Airport construction, expansion, modernization, operation, and air transport operation as well as development of metro rail, north-south cross-border railways, and east-west railways based on their feasibility and return on investment is also an area within transport sector where we can use the alternative project development modalities, including PPP. Another area could be urban development, including housing, urban utility development, urban transport operation, and solid waste management, in which the public sector and private sector's joint venture can give the better results. Because of the time limit, I will not elaborate much, and therefore this type of discussions and discourses among the stakeholders are very important, in my opinion, to create the favorable environment for PPP by further improvements in our policy and institutional setups. Thank you.
So thank you, sir, for elaborating the infrastructure need in Nepal and the possibility of inviting the private sector investment in such infrastructure. Thank you for this. Last but not the least, may I request our panelist, Mr. Radesh Panta, who is our former CEO of Investment Board Nepal, for his opening statement on PPP experience in Nepal and way forward. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adhikari. Mr. Chair, our distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, it is indeed a great pleasure for me to be here because I was the first CEO of Investment Board, and my colleague Sushil Bhatta is there now, and we've 10 years have gone by. And when you really look at Investment Board and the projects that we're doing, I think what the expectation in Nepal is that the projects have to be done overnight. It really takes a lot of time, especially PPP projects. My experience in PPP projects is definitely just not about private sector. It's about the government. It's about basically the stakeholders down where the projects are happening, the locals. It's about international partners, and especially for Nepal, for the first few projects, I think DFIs are going to play a huge role. So it takes a lot of time. The gestation is long, and I think the way to go about is really to focus on building the foundation, which I believe is happening right now. You guys have come out with a 5-year plan, the strategic plan, and let me share an example. I mean, when we did the PDA, Project Development Agreement, honestly, even I didn't have a clue what it was all about. It's a very, very detailed document between two partners, the government and the private sector. And it took us about 2 years, and two years of hard work. Because PPP is all about managing risk. It's really not about funding. Finances are there all over the place. I'm sure our friends in ADB, World Bank, CDC, other international banks will fund provided those projects are sustainable, they have good E&S standards, they have social safeguards, and all the risks are allocated. That's what PPP is all about. It's about all the risks allocated. For a small PPP also, it's not about, the private sector is not really investing. They're taking the risk, they're taking the loan from the bank. But what the bank would like to see is that all the risks are mitigated. So that's what we need to focus on. We need to focus, and PPP cannot happen just because the government wants or the private sector wants. PPP has to be something whereby, that project, we need to communicate to the people, we need to go to locals, we need to go to wadas, now, municipalities, provinces, and we have to win the hearts and minds of people. And then only these projects will happen. Otherwise, as you have seen in Nepal, it's pretty much politicized at times because, People just don't know details. So I think creating a strong foundation, I think that's what is being done, hopefully, and that's going to help a lot. And in order to do that, I think capacities have to be built both at the private sector and the government level. I know Shekhar is here, but the PPP capacity is not just about finance. It's about project finance. It's about really difficult aspects of risk and return. So those are the things that our private sector also needs, and this is a very, very good time because because of COVID, investments are going down. I believe in developing countries, last year it went down by about 44%. So countries have to start looking inward. So what I would request, the DFIs also is you have to start working with the private sectors. You have to enhance their capacity also. By enhancing just the government's capacity is not going to make things happen. So that's what I think is going to really work well. And the other area I wanted to focus was the new federal structure, especially on the way forward. Now you have 7 provinces, you have 657, I believe, local governments. Now I work with VROC and company, and we're actually helping out these municipalities come up with their PPP Act, PPP units and all that. But I guess what the investment board strategy should be to really coordinate with these, because investment board is a very, should be a very non-political, very professional, transparent institution. It has to be autonomous. I hope that's going to happen soon. Otherwise, it cannot be sidetracked by politics. So in order for that to happen, it also needs to have a very small group. It cannot have, it cannot be huge and bureaucratic. So there needs a good coordination mechanism whereby investment board is working along with the authorities in the provinces and the PPP units, within different municipalities. Now, my other point, is basically, I think what we need to really go now is from opinionated, analysis to really evidence-based data. That's something which we don't have, and I believe investment board can work with all academia, and we need to start doing research. We always hear about lessons learned. What lessons did we learn from so and so projects? But let's really analyze that. Let's really bring that into practice. Let's bring those lessons learned. Let's do research on that, and let's make sure that those come out in the new laws and acts and so forth. Anyway, so this is all I have for the moment. I think I think PPP projects are very important for Nepal, not just for financing. I think in order to increase our trade economy, we need PPP projects. But in order to do that, I think it's not just the government; it's the private sector, it's the people, it's the locals. It's very complicated structure, as I believe our World Bank friend said, and we got to make that happen. And finally, I would like to also mention that from the government side, we cannot just look at the financial rate of return. It's got to be economic rate of return. I'll give an example. That's my personal view. I mean, we're talking about fast track about, I think in 2013-14, the cost was about 1 billion, I think, maybe $900 million. And at that point, it was felt that is too expensive, especially to provide a $200 million, I believe, BGF, subsidy to the project. But now if you look at it, the cost has gone up to almost 1.7 billion, and we haven't even started. So we should not be, we should actually look at the long run. We should not be, just look at how much the government is going to spend. We should think about if that project had happened now. Look about the connectivity. Look at our how our exports would have been. Look at basically the value chain. The the linkages that it would have produced. So I think all this is very important, and this is something that we need to focus on. And again, I think we need to make sure that all the stakeholders are happy. When I was at investment board, I think my 60-70% of time actually went for that. Talking to people, educating people, politics, different bureaucracy and all that. But there has to be a system in order to do that, and that would be my suggestion to the CEO. I think that is very, very important, because then only projects happen. Because otherwise, even a few people raise a black flag. I mean, we are in such a political country that good things may not happen. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your thought-provoking ideas. Based on your experiences, you have spoken well, and you have highlighted on the conditions on which the PPP can, sustain, or PPP can be thought on. Thank you for this. Looking at the time, we have already, spent 1 hour and 5 minutes. So, I have to request the panelists, as I know, you have enriched experiences. So to, speak within 3 minutes is very difficult for you. But I still request you, to limit the answers, because we have to cover at least 2 questions from your side. Or you may wish to, you have already spoken a lot, I guess. So you may limit the expression within 1 or 1.5 minutes for each question, because we don't have much time. So sorry for this. So without taking much, I would come again to the former CEO, Mr. Rajesh Panta, and I would request you, sir, can you little bit, explain on what would be the best way forward toward effective implementation of PPP in Nepal? Request you to be very specific, sir.
I think I've spoken a lot of that already. I think what the investment board should do is they should base on research. They should actually grow their research capabilities. Second, I think communication channels, managing the locals, managing the politicians, managing the government, managing, that needs to really be focused. And third, I think, projects, you have to spend time to really understand the projects. I think investment board, as I see, is the commercial face for the government. So they are like experts. You have, at the other side of the table, you have private sector. So investment board is that for the government, right? So investment board needs to understand what the government can get from that project, and then negotiate. So I think those are important, and those, anyway, preparation is very, very important.
So thank you, sir. So I'll go quickly to our Joint Secretary Keshav, sir. What is the need and the environment for PPP developing projects in Nepal? May I request you, because we have already covered, maybe within a minute, sir.
Okay. Yes, we have some basic level of arrangements, environment, so that we could attract PPP for power sector, especially in hydropower. But still, we are lagging behind for it in other infrastructure sectors. So, in my opinion, the first and foremost thing for PPP is we have to understand the essence of PPP. As the eminent other panelists also said, PPP is not only to manage the fund, but basically it is to manage the risks, because the PPP contract is not same as the traditional contracts between two parties, which are shorter time span. As the PPP projects has longer span of time, the potential risks would be more. So there should be clear provision in our policy documents as well as the contract documents how the risks could be resolved.
Thank you, sir.
And also the both sectors, private and government sector, public sectors, they should have the will to be in partnership for a long time.
So we'll come to you to collect the things which you have not spoken now, but you want to speak them. We'll collect them. We'll put them in the website to justice our audiences who have not got the chance to ask any questions, I guess, even in this session. So quickly, I'll go to the country director of ADB, Mr. Koswa. I know ADB's support for PPP projects start from project development, project structuring, financing, procurement to contract management. As such, what are the best practices to be followed for developing and procuring bankable and credible PPP projects in Nepal? I would request you to limit the response in a minute.
Thank you. So, first, I need a mic.
Sorry, because I have to tell
Yeah,
this
so
repeatedly.
just very quickly, just to say that ADB support to PPP goes well beyond project development. We're working, of course, upstream, midstream, and downstream on the financing as well. In terms of best lessons, I think we have to look at more advanced or maybe established markets, PPP market. And in general, the path towards a more sustainable PPP market typically is the following: a workable PPP enabling environment in terms of PPP framework or law, regulatory taxation and procurement regime. 2, sufficient institutional setup and capacity of government and agencies to design, prepare, develop and manage long-term PPP contract and assess potential risk, as we were talking about, and managing direct and contingent liability with a PPP contract. And 3, the overall government buy-in, leadership and support to PPP initiative.
Thank you very much, Mr. Koswa. Let me now welcome Mr. Peter Mosley, and questions for you, Peter, is: the World Bank has an extensive knowledge and experience in developing PPP projects in large infrastructure. What are the policy and regulatory challenges in implementing those PPP projects in Nepal, based on your experience? Can you please little bit elaborate on this?
Thank you very much. Everything has been said. This has been an incredibly rich conversation here, and I just wanted to thank everyone. I'm just going to zero in on 2 things very quickly. One is on the legal and regulatory environment. You need to have a whole of legislative approach to it. So your FDI laws, your PPP laws, the laws at a sector level have to be consistent and smooth if you want it, if you want to get the investors. Secondly, on the PPP unit, there are 3 functions, and they don't always have to be in the same building, but you need to have 3 functions. 1 is the project development. 2 is what, for a better word, you'd call the gatekeeper, the fiscal management. 3, PPPs are like marriages. They go on for years, but if you're going to make the marriage work, you have to pay attention every day. So you need really good monitoring. So those are the critical things, and they're all absolutely essential if you're going to minimize and manage and properly transfer risk, which is the biggest game for PPPs. So I'll stop there. That's what I think we need. And the World Bank can come in many ways, just like the Asian Development Bank, upstream, midstream, downstream. It's available with the enabling environment. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And now I'll come to the president of FNCCI, Mr. Shekhar Gulcha. He has already, spoken very well on the, the need of those projects, PPP projects, and the private sector expectation. What could be the role of private sector to enhance investment in PPP projects, and how can we increase private sector participation in PPP projects in Nepal? I request you to be brief.
Yes, I'll just take a minute. Thank you, Rameshji. First, I would like to correct a figure which I mentioned, which I wanted to say 2.2 million. By mistake, I said 22 million, so I stand corrected for that. As we know, in Nepal, the total, the gross capital formation, 77.9% is done by private sector. So obviously, if we are talking about PPP projects to succeed in Nepal, private sector has to be involved. So because I have to say it in very brief, I feel that we can work in tandem, investment board, Department of Industry, as a complementary role to improve PPP and investment climate. This is something which we can do, as well as attract investment. We can also work on areas which is not covered by IBN, because IBN obviously looks for a certain size. So there are areas which is not covered by IBN. I think we can look into it. We can also help develop project banks for PPP investment. I think this private sector's rich ideas and experience can really be handy here. And we can promote these projects. That is very, very important. We can promote this project through FNCCI's international and national network. As we know, we are in all 77 districts. We are present. And we domestically also can promote PPP projects, also internationally, because we have partnered most of our similar organizations like us in India, China, or elsewhere. So we can do road shows. We can promote PPP projects, and as well as other FDI projects in Nepal, which is a really I feel a very strong role private sector can take up. Besides this, we can also promote investments from countries which is eager to have success in Nepal, by setting up a permanent FDI investment facilitation desk in FNCCI. So this is something which we can do. And besides this, in the end, I feel that we can not only, as I mentioned, we can do road shows where in other countries for PPP projects, people who want to invest into Nepal. When a private sector is pitching for it, it's far more powerful. I think we can connect far better to other private sectors as well. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your remarks. Thank you for being brief as well. So we have now only 13 minutes left. So we have to make a round again and receive some questions. So just to be quick, I'll come to Radesh sir. Given the background, the regulatory and the legal framework and the IBN as strategic plan was just unveiled today morning, how could IBN position itself as the PPP center of excellence as it is mentioned in the strategic plan?
Yeah.
Sir.
Hello? Okay. I think, like I said, this is a very good beginning with the strategic plan. And I think the idea has to be that, IBN has to be autonomous. Ultimately, what I would say is IBN's basically revenues would come out of all the PPP projects that they're doing. Some kind of service fees from them. That's number one. I think secondly, again, in current context, in this current federal Nepal, IBN has to have a mechanism of working with the provinces and the municipalities, because according to the constitution, we have 3 levels of governments. So that mechanism has to be set up sooner the better, because I think a lot of the municipalities and provinces are coming up with their own PPP units and stuff like that. So IBN has to have a mechanism whereby they actually help enhance the capacity of these units also, because at the end of the day, I think it's IBN is working for the country, so that has to happen. Third, I think IBN's capacity itself really has to be brought up to mark, because PPP projects, especially the large-scale PPP projects, are not easy. They are difficult. and they have to work closely with line ministries and make sure that line ministries' capacity is at par also. So these are a few things, and every now and then, what I would urge IBN to do is have interaction with the political dialogue groups. Make political dialogue groups, make different groups, say groups in journalists, civil society, and let them know what IBN is doing. Let them know what is happening in projects that the IBN has. So I think these are the few things that really comes to my mind right now.
Thank you, sir. To be short, let me come to Keshav, sir. Given the explanation, you have already had, and the other panelists, can you briefly, highlight the PPP investments in the sectors besides energy, infrastructure in tourism, transport, and others? I request you to be brief, sir.
Yeah, I do agree that we are yet to attract the PPP investment in the sectors other than power, hydropower. In my opinion, there are a couple of reasons behind it. The first is uncertainty in the return on investment. In power sector, they can have PPA with the government agency, and there is certainty that the return on investment is can be got it, right? But in other sectors like transport, the return on investment to be collected with the individual users. This may create the risks to the investor, and it can be assured by providing MRG or some assurance to the developer. The second one could be the large investment need in the transport or urban projects. We have the lesson from Kathmandu Tarai Expressway. We had tried twice for PPP in 2007-8 and 2015-16, but we couldn't succeed. So and we don't have any experience on this type of project, so the investor without any experience may hesitate to invest in the large projects. Another one is large and linear project area. This also creates the risks. Even in case of hydropower, if we go for the distribution, may not be attracted like that generation only, because it will cover the linear area, and it can be encountered with geological, geographical, social hindrances in developing those type of linear projects. But we can start from airports, tunnels, bypass or link roads, and urban housing projects to initiate in this area. The other one is environmental compliance and social safeguard. It seems very complicated in Nepal. We have to revisit our existing legal provisions, whether they are appropriate for the countries like us in the level of development, and the provisions in environmental and social laws to maintain the level. And the linear projects are much more riskier for this. Another one is coordination issues. If any developer wish to invest for the infrastructure projects, although we have PPI and Act and regulation, and there is IBN, but the developer should coordinate many agencies, even many governments right now, the 3 tiers of government, to prepare, appraise or implement the projects. So this would be one hindrance, and I think it can be resolved by preparing the projects by concerned agencies, and just the IBN is as a focal or center for excellence, and the investor should not go beyond IBN. IBN can coordinate.
Thank you,
Another
sir.
one would be the lending facility, right? Lending facility also, we have, the investor cannot borrow the loan to use in the infrastructure projects like in industry or other projects. And I have also some, if you give me 1 minute, then I have also way forward also. First of all, we have to enhance the capacity.
Sir, can I request, maybe we can put that on our website, so I request you to stop here.
Okay then.
So very briefly, I'll come to Mr. Koswa. Given the ADB supporting to the PPP centers across the globe, how could Nepal accelerate investment in large PPP infrastructure in Nepal?
Yes, thank you for not very successful with microphones.
Okay, now.
Yes, thank you very much for that question. So, in terms of accelerating PPPs in Nepal, of course, I will go back to the point earlier on the need to address the country enabling environment, institutional capacity, and government support. Some progress has been made, of course, but a lot still need to happen. And these are critical components that will give strong signal and comfort to potential investors, commercial lenders, when investing and partnering with the government on the provision of large infrastructure projects. Of particular importance in the case of Nepal is to look really at the correspondence between your PPP framework and the sector framework. And I will just take an example to illustrate that, which is the water sector in which I worked for some time. I believe that the institutions and the regulatory framework is not in place really to support proper management and development of water resource project in Nepal. At the moment, under the Water Resource Act 1992, you can have the Department of Irrigation starting a mega project upstream of basins to divert water from one basin to another one with significant risk for investor downstreams. The legal framework in place doesn't prevent that. And that is a significant risk. So you need to look at these aspects, which is well beyond the PPP law or PPP framework. It is simply how the interest of the various developers and various sectors in the basin will be protected. And I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now let me come to Mr. Peter quickly. I mean, given the PPP modality and PPP-based infrastructure development, what would be the role of, the development partners like World Bank and other institutions in supporting Nepal in such perspectives?
Okay, 1 minute, right?
Yeah, 1 minute.
So, let me give you a specific example. It's a shame my colleague Babacar isn't here because I'm going to talk about some work we did in Senegal. Going into Dakar, the R3 road was absolutely packed. You spent hours getting into Dakar from any of the communities around. The World Bank's role in turning that problem into a huge success, which is a tremendously effective artery road that goes now into the capital, was the following. Supporting the government to get top-notch project development advisors. Assisting the government in the development of a policy framework, a legal framework that made it possible for them to move quite quickly, particularly on their procurement agenda. Helping them finance a willingness to pay study, which gave the government an understanding of what types of tariffs they could charge on a toll road, which is what it was going to become. And thirdly, to close the deal, what the World Bank financed was the resettlement of all of the small little businesses along that road that was one of the major problems for blocking the traffic. That's the type of things that we can do, if the government wants us to do that sort of thing. So it's just an example, maybe gives you a sense of how it's at every stage. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now I'll come to Mr. Shekhar Golcha, Chair of FNCCI. As you have mentioned already, besides that, what specific, the policy or regulatory support the private sectors expect from the government of Nepal?
Yes, in the inaugural session today, it was very interesting that the Honorable Finance Minister did mention that we should add another P, that is for people. I think this is the first thing which we expect the government to do, because many of the PPP projects get stalled because there is no local support. So I feel that this is the first point I would like to make, the fourth P. The second one is the biggest challenge, other biggest challenge in Nepal, or a bigger challenge, is to procure land or to lease a land because of unclear laws and very rigid laws, especially from the Forest Department. So I feel that it should be eased for all PPP projects. That's number two. There is also a mismatch between resources, need of the hour and the priority projects. We need to sit together and fix this problem, and we'll be very happy to partner with the government and development partners in this regard to actually fix the mismatch. The other point is the government is, we need to be addressed to attract private sector under PPP model. As per the indicators of worldwide governance indicator, Nepal's reform process is extremely slow. And FNCCI, with their Net 2030, we've been already working in 14 laws, which we feel that needs to be modified now. We have done a deep dive into that, and we will be presenting to the government very, very soon. These are the hindrances or something which does not make Nepal very attractive place for investment. So we feel that these are the things where we can work together with government of Nepal to attract private sector in PPP. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now, again, I'm sorry, I could not take any questions from the audience. And this is time to conclude this session, and without any delay, appreciating your time and energy for the panelists, and I'll request the chair, respected secretary, to conclude the sessions. Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, okay. All right. Thank you very much. It works. Thank you very much, and very rich deliberation from the well-learned panelists. So I don't want to repeat what they said, and there is no point that either myself or maybe the audience could be disagreeing with what they have expressed here. The only challenge for us is that let us codify, let us consolidate all those ideas that have come to this floor, and then set out our parameters to move forward on mobilizing PPP for the economic development of Nepal. Let me bring a few points in front of you. First and foremost, that my friends, there is competition in FDI, global FDI market. Unless and until we are able to offer an attractive package, no one would come to Nepal simply because we are nice people. Of course, that could be one condition, but we need to offer attractive package, because private money is for profit also. We should be understanding these things. Sometimes we Nepalese are very sentimental, right? But in the market, people look at the return. So let's make our conditions favorable. Let's make our package attractive, so that we'll be able to invite more FDI, and also we'll be able to force more PPPs, and that we can, use, or that we can mobilize in building our much needed public infrastructures or social infrastructures as per our priority. That's the one thing. Number second, doing PPP is not only bringing finance, it is also bringing technology, skill, knowledge. Let's not forget. PPP or FDI is not only finance, it's not only money. It's a skill, it's knowledge, it's bringing technology which we lack. Let's not hesitate to accept. So even in this market, in this field, there is much more opportunity beyond the finance, beyond the money as well. Let's understand this possibility as well. And also, let's also talk about and think about beyond the traditional type of PPP. Let's also think about blended financing. There's so many other instruments in the market. Why not we also try for that, right? Why not we talk to our development partners who might be supporting us to issue our local currency bond, for example, right? Or other types of bonds or other types of financial instruments, so that we can utilize them for the economic development of our country. And the other thing is that the COVID-19, of course, it has jeopardized our lives and livelihoods, but it has also created some opportunities. This is the right time to transform our economy, to transform our conditions, right? So we should be also thinking from that point. And also, let's also use this opportunity to create an enabling environment for digital economy, right? Now we have understood the importance of use of digital means into our economy, into our daily life, into the governance as well. So let's not blame the COVID. Of course, I don't want to claim here is COVID is nice. No, it's bad. But it has also created some opportunity to transform our traditional thinking, our way of doing business. So let's transform this. Let's take this time to transform and change our mindset, to change the tools, our delivery mechanism as well. And always, let's not forget that to bring PPP or to bring finance, there are 4 or 5 conditions, initial conditions. The number one is institutions. Institutions, I mean the legal frameworks as well as our organizations. Of course, we have PPP Act, we have Foreign Investment and Technology Transfer Act, we have rules and regulations in place, but sometimes, our rules fall in delivering and in implementation also. We should be also accepting this thing. So we should be also self-evaluating. We have institutions, yes, we do have, but also how this mechanism, how these rules and regulations have been applying, and how the investors been able to take benefit from these rules and regulations and institutions also. We need to revisit and correct if there are anything that we need to correct moving forward. Number 2 is the conducive environment. That environment, like Sekharji, you mentioned quite rightly, our civil society or even bureaucracy maybe, right? Or the ecosystem. We have to also be very careful and also make the ecosystem conducive for the PPP or for the FDI. That's also a challenge for us. Of course, in Nepal, I'm happy to, and we all acknowledge that there is huge, political commitment is there. No matter who comes in the government, we hear from every party, every political party, that they were, they wanted more investment in Nepal, and they want to invite foreign direct investment or even the local investment as well. The political commitment is there. Let's cash out this political commitment. Let's, use this opportunity. That's what I would say. And the other thing is that the 5th is the market potential. We are sitting in the 2 giant markets, but we have not been able to exploit or use this opportunity. Not only that, there is a growing national market as well. If you see our trade deficit, if you see our trade volume, despite the COVID, last year we had the highest number of import. How come that was possible? Because there is the market, right? Unless and until there is a market, we won't import. It's a very simple math, right? So there is market inside the country as well, and there is huge market in the neighborhood as well. Let's explore this opportunity as well, and then let's create our conditions and our institutions so that we will be able to utilize the most needed fund, the most needed technology transfer, the most needed skill, and most needed knowledge. So I'd once again like to thank the rich deliberation from my panelists, and also I'd like to thank IBN for giving me this opportunity to chair such an important session. Thank you very much.
Thank you indeed. I'm sure we wouldn't have ended this any better. Thank you for the great note that this entire session, which came up with diverse views and perspectives, yet was very much, crisp, candid, and then contributing, adding to the entire perspective of PPP and the effort that we made to bring forth this topic at this very important juncture, and made an effort to dissect the prospects, apparatus, and management. Certainly, this entire deliberation here calls for some reality check, and I think we're headed the right way. Thank you, esteemed panel, for your very valued time, first of all, your gracious presence, and of course for the very valued and enriching perspectives. And thank you for adding a lot of value to today, that is the celebrations, a beginning or commencement of a year-long celebration of Investment Board in Nepal. And together with the esteemed panelists herein, the panelists of the session one, and then the audience, the distinguished audience that's present here, and to those who are connected with us since morning via the social platform. We look forward to all of your support, continuing support and cooperation in the days ahead as we move forward with heightened spirits. And towards the ending moments now, we take a moment again, ladies and gentlemen, for this very important formality. I have the pleasure of inviting upon stage the CEO of Investment Board of Nepal, Mr. Sushil Bhatta, to extend our heartfelt appreciation and gratitude to the distinguished panel. Mr. Bhatta, please. First and foremost, the session chair, Finance Secretary, Mr. Madhu Kumar Marasini. This is coming as a gesture of appreciation and gratitude from the entire Investment Board Nepal family for your valued presence and inputs. Likewise, we extend our gratitude to our esteemed panelists, namely Mr. Keshav Kumar Sharma, Joint Secretary, Ministry of Fiscal Infrastructure and Transport. To Mr. Faris Harad Zervis, Country Director, the World Bank, and in person to Mr. Peter Mosley from the World Bank. Thank you indeed. Mr. Arnold Koswa, Country Director, Asian Development Bank. Mr. Radhesh Pant, former CEO, Investment Board, Nepal. Mr. Shekhar Golcha, President, Federation of Nepali Chambers of Commerce and Industry, FNCCI. And last but not the least, for the session moderator, Mr. Ramesh Adhikari, the Under Secretary, Office of the Investment Board, Nepal. And towards the end, I request all our esteemed panelists to kindly step forward for a quick group photo opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen, let us hear it for our esteemed panelists one more time. And along with this very, very precious photo opportunity, we are now headed towards the close of the first day of the celebration of IBN Decade. Thank you all for your very, very important presence, your consistent support to IBN and the government of Nepal since long, and we look forward to more collaboration, cooperation, and partnership in the days ahead. Have a great evening. Thank you one more time.